Welcome back to City Education, your home for knowledge in all forms, shapes, and sizes. In today's video, we'll be going back to environmental law. This time, we'll begin with a critical question. How do we develop our society without destroying the environment?
Sustains us.
Now, this is where the concept of sustainable development comes in.
At its simplest,
Sustainable development means meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to sustain their own needs.
it is not about stopping development.
Instead, it is about guiding development in a way that respects the environment. This means that whenever government authorities, developers, or businesses plan new projects, whether it is building roads, housing, or industrial zones, they must also consider the environmental impact. Sustainable development has three interconnected pillars. Now, one is economic growth, the creation of jobs, infrastructure, and opportunities. Number two, social development, uplifting communities and ensuring fairness. Finally is environmental protection. This is preserving ecosystems and natural resources. Only when these three pillars work together can true sustainable development be achieved. In South Africa, the concept has been shaped by both our constitutional values and our environmental laws. It is the bridge between development goals and environmental protection, ensuring that progress today does not lead to disaster tomorrow. Now let's get into it. Now let's get into the RDP and early foundations of sustainable development in South Africa. Now, South Africa became a democracy in 1994. This meant that it was transitioning into a new sphere and a new way of operating, meaning it had to address certain challenges such as equality, poverty, while protecting the environment for future generations. To respond to this, the Reconstruction and Development Programme, or RDP, was introduced. Now, this program was more than just a policy. It was a national vision to rebuild the country, redistribute resources fairly, and provide essential services such as housing, water, sanitation, electricity, and reformed land. One thing that made this policy groundbreaking was that it recognized that development and environmental protection must go hand in hand. The program introduced two principles of sustainable development. The first principle was intergenerational equity. This principle focuses on ensuring fair access to resources for all people in the present, particularly the poor and marginalized. For example, making sure that every household has clean water, electricity, and decent housing. The second principle recognized by the RDP was the intergenerational equity. The first is intergenerational equity. The second, intergenerational equity. Now, intergenerational equity is focused on ensuring that the use of natural resources today does not compromise the survival and development of future generations.
This means that
While we meet today's needs, we must also protect forests, rivers, and minerals for tomorrow's needs. The RDP was not just about fixes. It was about laying a foundation for long-term sustainable growth. Its vision recognized that poverty alleviation, social justice, and environmental protection are deeply connected. After the RDP, other policies like the GEAR, GEAR, emphasized microeconomic stability, but the RN, spirit, balanced source or upliftment with environmental K, remained a guiding framework. Importantly, the RDP planted the seed for South Africa's environmental governance system. Its emphasis on sustainable development influenced later policies like the 1998 White Paper on Environmental Management and ultimately the National Environmental Management Act, the NEMA. The Reconstruction and Development Programme was not only a policy vision. It had priority areas that touched every household. These included adequate housing, water and sanitation services, energy and electrification, as well as land reform. The RDP insisted that all these must be carried out sustainably. For example, when new housing developments were rolled out, planners had to ensure that homes are not built on wetlands or floodplains, which could damage fragile ecosystems and put residents at risk. Thus was an expression of intergenerational equity, providing decent shelter for people today while applying intergenerational equity by protecting environmental resources for the future. In the provision of water and sanitation, the RDP highlighted that clean drinking water is a basic human need. At the same time, it recognized that the rivers and groundwater are finite resources. If overexploited, they could run dry, leaving future generations without secure access. Energy projects revealed the same balancing act. Electrification brought light and opportunity to millions of South Africans, but the long-term vision was to explore renewable sources. This ensured that while current communities benefited, the environment and future generations could not bear the cost of unsustainable energy practices. The Constitutional Code later confirmed this vision of sustainability in the landmark Fuel Retailers Association of South Africa. This is Director General Environmental Management 2007. In this case, the court defined sustainable development as the integration of social, economic, and environmental factors into planning, implementation, and decision-making for the benefit of present and future generations.
This definition cemented
For what the RDP had envisioned, which is the fact that development cannot be separated from environmental key. Every decision about growth must weigh its social benefits, economic potential, and environmental impact together. In short, the RDP in action showed that sustainable development is not about obstacle to progress. It is the very framework that makes long-term progress possible. Now, the Reconstruction and Development Programme laid out the foundation, but South Africa needed a comprehensive environmental framework to ensure that its principles were carried through into law. This led to the 1998 White Paper on Environmental Management Policy, which marked a turning point for environmental governance. The White Paper embraced the idea that the environment is not separate from development. It is the core part of every decision about growth. Building on this, South Africa enacted the National Environmental Management Act of 1998, known as NEMA, N-E-M-A. NEMA is often called the cornerstone of environmental law in South Africa. It provides the framework for how all organs of state must approach development projects that impact the environment. Now, some of the key principles in the NEMA include, firstly, integration. When it comes to integration, environmental concerns must be integrated into every stage of planning and decision-making. Development can no longer ignore the environment. The second principle is public participation. Here, communities have the right to be heard in projects that affect them. This echoes to the people-driven approach of the RDP. No. 3 is the polluter pays principle. This principle outlines that those responsible for environmental harm must bear the cost of prevention, control, and cleanup. The fourth principle is the precautionary principle. Now here, action must be taken to prevent harm. Thus includes even situations where there is no full scientific certainty that the harm will occur. The fifth principle is the sustainable use of resources principle. Now, it entails that natural resources must be used responsibly so that they remain available for future generations. Now, as Kidd explains it, these principles ensure that sustainable development is not just an aspiration, it is a legal duty. They require governments, businesses, and developers to strike a balance between economic progress, social upliftment, and environmental care. Importantly, the National Environmental Management Act gave South Africa a voice in environmental governance. By extending the RDP's emphasis on public involvement, it ensures that decisions are not made behind closed doors, but rather in a way that reflects the concerns of communities, civil society, and future generations. DOE's framework also links directly to our Constitution, which guarantees the right to an environment that is not harmful to health and well-being. In many ways, NEMA operationalizes the constitutional vision of sustainable development. Now, the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, 1996, is the supreme law of the land, and it provides a strong foundation to sustainable development. Unlike the RDP, which was a policy, The Constitution enshrines environmental rights as binding legal obligations.
Section
24 states that everyone has the right to an environment that is not harmful to their health or well-being. The state must take responsible measures to ensure that the environment is protected and that development is ecologically sustainable, while also promoting social and economic development. This section does something remarkable. It recognizes that economic development and environmental protection are independent. And it also recognizes that sustainable development requires both. This vision of integration was reinforced in Director Mineral Development Housing Region versus Save the Wild Environment, 1999. In this case, the court had to consider whether communities had a right to be heard before a mining license was granted under the Old Minerals Act. The court held that the Audi Alteram Partem rule, the right to be heard, applied because finding posed enormous risks on the environment. The decision established that, number one, the right to an environment is a fundamental human right. Number two, public participation is essential in decisions with environmental consequences. The Constitutional Court, in another case which is the fuel retailers case, confirmed that environmental protection must be integrated into planning and decision-making. Sustainable development is not optional, but rather it is a constitutional requirement. Legal scholars like Michael Kidd note that Section 24 is unique because it links environmental protection directly to human well-being. It ensures that environmental rights are not treated in isolation, but are implemented along social-economic rights such as housing, health, and food. This means that the Constitution does not separate the right to environment from the right to development. Instead, it promotes a holistic approach where development must always be sustainable. Now, South Africa's environmental framework has been enriched by legal scholars such as Michael Kidd. His work helps us understand the deeper meaning of sustainable development in our law. He focuses on three core elements that define sustainable development in South Africa. Kidd identifies three core elements that define sustainable development in South Africa. Number one being integration, number two equity, and number three public participation. Kidd emphasizes that these three elements are not optional. They are entrenched in the National Environmental Management Act and given legal force by the Constitution. In fact, Kidd argues that sustainable development is not merely a policy slogan. It is a binding legal principle that must guide every government decision on the environment. He also points out that South African courts, through cases like fuel retailers and Save the Wild Environment, have confirmed these principles in practice, showing that sustainable development is a legal duty and not just an inspiration. In short, Kidd's perspective reminds us that sustainable development is the bridge between environmental law and human rights law. It ensures that development uplifts people, protect the environment, and respect the rights of both present and future generations. Now, sustainable development is more than just an idea in South Africa. It is a legal principle embedded in our Constitution, our environmental legislation, and reinforced by our courts. From the fuel retailers case to the Save the Vaal Environment case, we see that the judiciary has made it clear that economic growth cannot come at the cost of destroying the environment or excluding communities. Development must always balance environmental protection, social upliftment, and economic progress. Through the National Environmental Management Act, NEMA, the principles of sustainability, which are integration, equity, and public participation, guide every decision that affects our natural resources. As Kidd reminds us, sustainable development is not optional or decorative. It is the bridge between rights and responsibilities, ensuring that today's generation can pursue growth without robbing tomorrow's generation of their future. Ultimately, environmental law in South Africa tells us that our right to a healthy environment is inseparable from our duty to protect it. Sustainable development is the legal and ethical compass pointing us towards a just, inclusive, and environmentally secure future. Basically, by protecting our environment, we protect people. And by practicing sustainable development, we protect the future. Now don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you found this video helpful. If you need help on certain aspects, feel free to comment. This is City Education, your home for knowledge in all forms, shapes, and sizes. See you on the next video.